So many good things in both of those talks. I got like all these notes here, and I'm going to hopscotch around here. Just so many good things from both of you, brothers, practical things and so forth.
I really appreciate Mark having a talk on patience before I gave a talk with 22 points.
Yeah. That was like
Thanks,
application.
I was thinking the same thing. In between point 21 and point 22, but that's fine, whatever.
Nice. Let's start with you, Vrogup. Vrogup.
Both are great.
What's that?
How does your mom say it?
My mom says Vrogup.
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 If you're born in the right
So I
country.
got it. I got it right.
Or it's Vrogup, if you're in from
Vrogup.
Netherlands.
Vrogup. Vrogup.
It's like the way Don Carson says genre.
Clock's ticking, bro. Let's roll. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. Vrogup. I'm gonna start with you because your stuff will also kind of bleed into this evening, I think, in the talk there. But Mark, you had two basic points. Just to recap, to remind us all, patience is a mark of discipleship was your first big point. It's priority. It's for the Spirit. It's part of maturity. It's sought to be prayed for. Mark of genuine conversion. Then your second main point was that it's a key component of pastoral ministry. So spiritual leadership always involves patience, character of patience, part of pastoral work, teaching with patience, pastoral care, suffering, or patience and unsuffering and unsuffering treatment, which are your subpoints. True or false, brother? Pastoral impatience leads to pastoral burnout. Pastoral impatience leads to pastoral burnout. True or false?
Generally true.
True or false? Pastoral impatience will harm your family.
True.
True or false? An impatient person is more likely to abuse authority.
Absolutely true.
Can you unpack that one a bit?
An impatient person at their core has a pride issue related to I have my agenda, and whenever we have areas of impatience, I had this idea of how this was going to turn out. I had an idea of how this would turn out. It didn't happen how I thought it was going to, and so therefore I'm frustrated. And so there's a idolatry issue that's implicit in that. When then that idol has the opportunity to express that in an official position of power or title or ways in which you can actually make your vision a reality and force it through, it just exacerbates that idol, and it just takes off. And that can happen in a small way, in a marriage with your kids. It can happen pastorally. It doesn't matter what the authority level is, or the heart of a dictator is. Dictatorships are fairly efficient.
Yeah.
For that very negative reason, right? So.
Yeah. Last one, true or false? Pastoral patience requires a deep, I don't know if this is a word, convincedness in the sovereignty of God.
Yeah, absolutely. True.
Unpack that slightly.
I think it goes back to what I said on the negative side is at the heart of impatience is a pride or self-centeredness. And on the other side, the way that it's conquered is with an ability to trust that God must know that I needed these people in my church. He must know that that particular issue in our church isn't dying slowly. He must know that this is part of my spiritual formation process. And so if one has a high view of God and His sovereignty, you can become thankful for hard circumstances, hard people, hard challenges, and instead of being worn out and exhausted because you're impatient and trying to figure out how to get out of this, you can just rest and not fatalistic, but just go, we'd like to see this change. It isn't changing as fast as we like. The Lord knows, and then perhaps God will grant people repentance. I think that text is really, really important in 2 Timothy, and frankly it's liberating because their repentance doesn't depend upon my ability or my force or my exegesis.
Yeah.
it's God's.
Yeah.
And so I got to work hard and then rest.
Yeah. I had one more on sufficiency of Scripture, but you talked about that in your talk. So as you were talking, brother, I kept thinking sort of in the backdrop of what you were saying, sort of David Wells books or John Piper, Brothers, We Are Not Professionals books, or the business mindset of so much pastoring. I say that's the backdrop because yours was very much contrary to predominant pastoral marketing models. Anything to comment on that, brothers? How is it that the model of a pastor today doesn't encourage patience? How do we wrongly think about being pastors that doesn't go there? Any of the brothers?
I'd say just a couple of things. One, to piggyback on the last point, I heard years ago, God is committed to making us long-suffering. But to make us long-suffering, he has to bring people into our lives who make us suffer long. That's painfully true. You'll never develop that Christ-like character trait without people coming in who rub you the wrong way like sandpaper. So it does help you. For me, even when I have, most of my students are wonderful, but there are a few that when they graduate, I speak in tongues. I'm so glad they're gone. I mean, I become a Baptist for at least a brief moment. And yet I recognize that God brought them here, at least in part, to work on me because his goal is to make me a long-suffering kind of person. Second part is, I think at the root of it, we've lost the biblical model of what we're called to be, and that is shepherds. We've also lost the biblical pattern that the church is most like a family, not a corporation. Now, we can learn from the corporate world and we can use wise principles, and we should. But I relate to my family differently than I relate to almost anybody else. And there is grace, there is patience, there is long-suffering, there is attention, there is concern and care, even to the point of sacrificing willingly because their interest matters more to me than my own. When then you translate that into the church, you're going to be much more drawn to this kind of model that Mark exhibited for us and put before us today than you will some type of corporate model.
Yeah.
I think this sort of impatience can be fueled, this is really related to what Danny's saying, it can be fueled by this lust for success, whatever that looks like, that ambition for some kind of outward visible success and notoriety and all of that good stuff. It will drive an impatience. Also related to something Danny is saying in terms of the model of ministry, I think the notion of wanting to do ministry, by which people sometimes have this kind of project idea in mind, not recognizing that the people are the ministry, you're serving the people. That gets in the way, and people then become inconvenient, they slow you down, they need to comply, or they're hindering what I really want to do. I mean, wherever we feel ourselves thinking that this person is hindering what I want to do, somebody saying, oh my God, that's probably an indication that we're thinking wrongly about people, and the nature of the ministry is shepherding. And people aren't projects, right? And thinking wrongly about what we're called to quote unquote do there. And some impatience is probably growing up.
That's where your point about loving people more than where they're at was just so on the point.
Which was wonderful, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think meeting in discipling relationships will teach us patience. The Lord's constantly reminding me that I didn't get here overnight, and neither did you. You think about how long the Lord worked on us. And, in discipling relationships, I like to tell people it's a crock pot recipe. It's not microwavable. We want, microwavable frozen dinners are great. But the discipling relationship is the long view, not just the life view. Mark and I spoke years ago. I'll never forget, we were walking by the lake by his church, and he said to me, young leaders suffer from two things, two challenges equally. They overestimate what can be done in the short run, and they underestimate what can be done over the long haul. And it was so helpful for me. I've never forgotten that. And it just shows you that this is a long view, and we're patient with brothers. I remember A.H. Strong was telling the story of a seminary professor who was approached by one of his students who came to him and said, is there any way I can get the same class credit by doing a shorter class? And the professor said, yes, but it depends on what you want to be. It takes 6 months to grow a mushroom. It takes 100 years to grow an oak tree. What do you want to be? And so we have to think through this. I just think I appreciated the patience challenge for us, just to think through. It takes time. People are messy, and so it takes time.
I think this is one of the ways that 9Marks, I'm not doing a commercial, but this is fact for me. Like, I don't know very many well-known national-based ministers of the gospel who communicate like those two things that Mark communicated. And I've heard that before, and it was at a 5 years conference where you said, first 5 years, your church is not a project to be fixed, it's a people to be loved. And I just think like that I think needs to be continually communicated from folks who may have the outward, like, how'd you get to where you are? Well, not without a lot of patience and pain. I just think that needs to be a more front of the room sort of conversation.
Robbie, let's go back to that point, though, on this question of patience in the context of one-on-one relationships. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
This time? I remember spending a lot of time with this one guy who wanted to spend time with me because I think I was an older guy, it was in a seminary context, and he liked the attention, and he liked to hang out, and I spent a couple of years with this guy. And I don't know how much fruit it bore. And so finally I just like, I don't think you're a good investment of time. I didn't say that. Yeah. But I thought it. Yeah. And I acted accordingly. Is that an appropriate decision to make? Should we make discriminating decisions between you're worth spending time with, you're not?
Yeah.
How does patience factor into that in discipling members of the church?
Well, I think Jesus did that. I think you're on safe ground there. I think Jesus did that. Hey, listen, I want to follow you. Jesus said, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests. The Son of Man doesn't have a place to lay his head. I'm not one of these high-flying rabbis that stay at the best Western hotels with mints on the pillows. I'm not a frequent flyer on Delta. I don't even have a place to sleep, much less meat, right? Hey, let me follow you. Let me go bury my father. Let the dead bury their dead. As for you, come follow me. So I think in discipling relationships, Jesus never, here's an interesting point. Jesus never lowered the bar. He always raised the bar. And I find myself just spending a lot of time with people who don't want to be spent or time to be spent with. And as pastors, we have to steward our time. Our time is very valuable to us. And so what I'm looking for, and you've heard this, Howard Hendricks, this is what I'm looking for when I'm investing in a person. I'm looking for fat Christians, right? You guys have heard this. Faithful, available, and teachable. And the number one thing, if you have all the talent in the world and you don't have this one thing, I can't work with you. But if you have little to no talent to write home about, but you have this one ability, you can work with anybody, and that's teachability. If you don't admit that you don't know everything, you can't learn anything. And I think you have to, and that's what I'm looking for in guys. Now, I've been meeting with guys practically and personally. I meet personally in a group of 3 to 5. There are reasons I do that. People think one-on-one discipleship, and there's a time and place for that. David and I met in one-on-one discipleship, David Platt and I, for about 6 months, and then we opened it up to a group of about 7 or 8. We do 3 to 5. There's books written on that. There's analysis, and the trump card is Jesus never met with anybody one-on-one systematically over time. He had a discipleship group of 3. We always meet out of the group of 3 one-on-one, but never in place of the group. I've written on this. I don't have time to talk about it here. But what I would say is when you meet with a group, here's what would solve that issue. When you meet with a group, you have to have a final meeting time. Now, obviously, you still meet with them outside of the group, but there has to be a point where the mentee becomes a mentor. And this is what I loved about what you said, that there has to be a point where the player becomes a coach. And the saying we say is the gospel came to you because it was heading to someone else. And if you think about that, so everyone in here either is doing one of two things. You're running with passion and handing off the baton, or you're fumbling the handoff. And I think if you set those parameters on the front end, it's a whole lot easier. And you learn differently. See, when I was with David, he used to say, you're never learning for yourself. This is not even about you. And I was only a believer 1 year removed from $180 a day heroin and cocaine addiction. David and I met 1 year after that. And David used to say, you're not learning for yourself. And I'm like, bro, you don't, what is God going to do with me, right? And he's like, no, you're learning for the people behind you. And that's why I said you never should listen to a message or a sermon without taking notes. Why? Because you're going to forget 85% of what you just heard in 20 minutes. And that is bad stewardship, bro. and only the way David Platt could say, right? It's bad stewardship. So I think if you have that final point to say, hey, listen, this is not about you. You're learning for the next guy. I think that changes the dynamic of the relationship.
I think that there's a wisdom point where it's not wise to continue a relationship. I just don't make that decision when I feel impatient. So maybe I have a bad meeting and I'm like, I am so done. Sure. So I'm going to pause, slow to speak, slow to wrath. I'm going to pray, maybe meet again, seek counsel, and then I may decide, in this brother's best interest and in mine, we need to just find a way to land this plane. I'm just not going to make that decision when I'm feeling impatient. That's a warning sign that I could be on thin ice.
Yeah, good.
Amen. Can I ask Mark a question?
Sure.
So on the one hand, we were talking about patience, and again, brother, thank you. You just fed my soul so wonderfully well. On the one hand, we're talking about patience, and we were talking about, on one side, the things that drive impatience. I wonder if you would talk about the other side. What's the difference between patience and things like cowardice, unfaithfulness, laziness, and so on? So, how does patience differ from those things?
That's a great question.
Like, I think I'm being patient, but really I'm just being lazy.
Yeah. Or, you really need to do a hard thing, and you say, let's just be patient here. Let's just, and patient 1 month turns into 2 years, and you've not dealt with a thing.
Yeah.
You're being patient about answering the question.
Or is he being chicken? I can't tell.
Yeah, I think that you have to wrestle with, at the end of the day, what is the reason? Because there can be self-centered patience, right? Or things that sound patient when they're really not, and you're trying to gain something else. I think that there's a convictional piece, that there are some things you just can't be patient in. And they need to be changed, and they need to be changed quickly. And there were some things in both church settings that I've been in that we've needed to change quicker than what I was even comfortable with. But it was time, and it was clear that the Lord was leading that direction. So part of this, I think, and part of my challenge in answering is that my motor runs fast, not slow. I want to pull the trigger faster than not. And so I've got to tip towards the patient piece, not towards the other side of the equation. And so I think more about the other than I do the other side of the coin that you mentioned in reference. I think that's a great counterbalance that you really could wait way too long to make some changes.
What about people in the pew, okay? So we're talking about pastors here. Do you think people in our congregations err on the side of patience, or are they overzealous with serving the Lord and discipling people? I mean, what are you thinking at CHBC? That may be an anomaly. That's probably not the best church to ask. At every other church but CHBC. I know CHBC, and that's a compliment. But in most churches, what would you guys think?
Let me come back to this, and then I'll piggyback on that. As I was thinking about it, go back to the text that I preached from this morning, and Peter says, not the way of the cross for you. Jesus wasn't patient. He jumped on that immediately. Why? And I would say if it's an issue of doctrine that is that's basically heretical, or if it's a sin issue, you have a brother or a sister that is in adultery. That's an easy one to choose. You say, well, we need to be patient with this. No, you don't. You need to go see them right now. It's not comfortable. You'd prefer not to, but you can't wait on things like that. So I think when it's a sin issue or it's a crucial cardinal doctrine issue, you have to move quickly. When it's other things that are just, well, God, that's my preference. I just wish this, well, no, that's different.
Like assessing somebody to be an officer in your church.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good analogy or a good example. So yeah, that's different. So we can slow down. Watch this. In fact, we probably are wise to slow down and be patient.
Well, you had that excellent illustration of the KJV for 8 years that you prayed from. Now, how you got that church without knowing that the KJV is what they used, I wasn't quite sure I understood that.
No, I understood that was the issue, but I didn't understand how deeply entrenched
see.
into their,
Okay.
in some respects, their worldview it was.
Right.
So I understood it at one level, was like, all right, and then I found
Oh,
the
boy.
floor, right, and then moved from there.
Well, let me throw out a bunch of these quickly, and you guys can all do. Here's the question: should I be patient or not patient? I mean, act quickly, or it just really depends. Are you ready? You're all gonna do this, or this, or this. All right, here we go. No.
I've seen some of the questions.
You inherit a church, and this is what you find. I'm gonna give you a bunch of bullet points. This is what you find. Be patient for a while. Don't be patient, act quickly. Yeah, depends. You ready? American flag on the stage. Depends.
I pastored that church already. Yeah.
Okay. So you might move quickly if you could. But you're not going to die on that hill. That's what I'm interpreting.
It depends on what you uncover. I mean, if you uncover that they really believe America is the chosen people of God, you help them exegete, 2 Chronicles and Psalm 33 and things better, and they still maintain that belief, then you might be gone quickly.
A statement of faith that specifies a view on the millennium.
What are these again now?
This is be patient. Don't be patient. You need to act. This is, it just depends.
Read it again.
Statement of faith that specifies a view on the millennium. So we got some yes, be patient, some not sure. Okay. An elaborate committee structure that's hindering the work of the ministry. So you're not patient.
How
You're
many
getting rid of that.
committees? What are their names?
Flower committee.
Flower
I
committee.
pastored that church as well.
Kitchen committee.
Keep going.
Pulpit
Name the
committee.
committee, and I'll tell you.
Committee
Yeah.
on committees.
Committee on
In that
committees.
church, yeah.
Those are very helpful.
Edifying, too.
Altar calls.
Oh, again, what is this? Is
I'm going to be patient, and they want me to keep doing them.
This is patient.
This is patient.
impatient.
I'm not going to change something. This church
I'm gonna
has
do
a
it now.
pattern of long, drawn-out altar calls.
Not going to be patient
every
on this.
week.
Not going to be patient on this.
This goes against what I think is best. So not patient, maybe, and
I don't really like this exercise.
you don't have to play. You don't have to play. Baby.
It worked well in Fort Worth when we
I
did it last
know.
month.
So you guys would go in and say you'd immediately stop it. Just boom, right out of the chute. First week, first
what?
month.
Stop
The altar call.
Stop all
Stop
the
the
calls.
altar call.
I did. Now, I
And you
may
still-
not be there long, but well,
Because again, my thing would be, is this the wisest way to shepherd them?
what I
But
did
again,
is
but-
I changed to a next steps area. So I moved the altar call to a next steps area, which I think is a better way to
Okay.
respond to people who want to respond to the message.
So- and
in
I-
more ways than salvation.
And I announced my opposition to it before they voted on me, so they knew I was opposed to it. And I also tried to assess what kind of support the altar call had in the congregation. And I could imagine it being so much that I would decide to do a kind of medium step
But so
like
that sounds like it could have been this given different dynamics.
Yeah, that's true.
It could have been that. Yeah.
Because what I'd say to these guys, I understand the aversion to that, But my goodness, if you go into a church that's been doing that for 100 years and you bust up the cartel the first week, you may be calling U-Haul on Monday.
Well, that's exactly right. And the reason I'm here in large measure is because I'm the one doing the altar call.
I thought you weren't playing. What are you saying now?
He's back playing.
I said I didn't like it. I'll play. I'll play.
Next one.
But no, real
Next-
quick before you go on.
What? You didn't want to play.
Real quick.
Okay.
Be patient.
Patience, Jonathan.
There's an opportunity there to clarify what conversion is, to talk about it in a way that's helpful, to redirect in ways that give more counseling. Because what I've found in the church that I was in Cayman, Jonathan had helpfully blown up altar calls and had, really ran up people out of the church who wanted them.
Before you got there.
These two
Before
brothers
we got
actually
there,
pastored the same church
Before I got
sequentially.
there.
First Jonathan, then Tabidi.
Yeah. And so there were only a couple of folks, and here's what I found when I listened to them. They had this sense that they wanted people to be able to respond to powerful preaching. And the way they had learned that was the altar call. And I just thought, well, let's talk about response and what the biblical response is and so on.
Expositional preaching. They want you to tone down on the expositional preaching. They've never had it. Okay. A really bad Sunday school curriculum that all the Sunday schools are using.
Define bad doctrinally or just like.
Let's say it's not heresy. It's just really shallow, insipid, and blah. Okay. Depends. Maybe patient. Okay. Not patient.
I'm struggling with this thing.
I know, bro.
A style of music you find objectionable.
Why? What's objectionable about it?
Style.
I would be
Content style.
Oh, then yeah.
Okay,
There's no
mostly
reason-
patient, except Sabiti's a little impatient maybe on that one.
I don't even know what the question
All right,
means.
never mind. Don't worry about it.
Hey, Thabiti, you just hold your hand out like this, brother, the whole time. You can go like this. Hold
There
that
you go.
roll with
There
that
you
one.
go.
Hold right there. That's good.
Why are you rubbing on me, brother?
Just want to calm you down. It's okay. It's okay.
I'm being really patient with you right now.
Can you email him your notes?
He didn't hear.
All right. Denominational affiliation with a largely liberal denomination.
Looking at
You've just accepted some Baptist church that's kind of affiliated with American Baptist or something. Yeah, okay. All right. Multiple services?
we're waiting on you.
Why does this feel like a scene from Gladiator right now?
It's okay. It's okay. A beloved missionary, beloved by the church, who is utterly ineffective, and you feel like we are not heretical, but like we're squandering the Lord's money to send him to this guy over wherever.
Oh, patient.
A deacon who has a whispered reputation for being dishonest.
As what?
A whispered, you hear it whispered, reputation for being dishonest.
We're the new guy.
We're the new guy at the church.
Well, I'm going to go get him pretty quick. I go that way, yeah.
You're Danny?
Well, if that's what I hear, I'm going to find a way to go see him pretty quickly and verify or non-verify these things are true, and then that will determine if I find out, well, yeah, he really is a liar, then we're going here.
Yeah, okay. A beloved Sunday school teacher who loves Joel Osteen and affirms the gospel when you ask the right yes or no questions. But he sounds like Joel Osteen when he teaches in his Sunday school class.
Is his class growing?
Absolutely.
Stagnant.
It's the best class now.
patient, stagnant. I'm being patient with this guy. I'm not going to immediately remove him.
You could pray that maybe you could have him change.
We
as you
probably
sit
all
there
have
trying
that
to
guy.
disciple with him.
We
But
probably
if-
have that guy.
No, Robbie, we don't have that
Okay,
guy.
you don't have that guy. Okay.
Baptizing a child, I don't know what your respective, like, I would never baptize a 6-year-old. I'd never baptize a 10-year-old. But let's just say 4 or 5 years under whatever that line is, okay? So let's just say, I'm going to say a 6-year-old. There's a culture in the church of baptizing those 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. Your convictions are like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Patient, impatient. Okay, we have one kid who's not like the rest. Mark? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
It's black in America, man. Just black in America.
Well, let's listen. Complain. I don't like this game. It's a race thing, isn't it?
We do have cooler games.
We got to have Thabiti lead one of these panels and see what happens.
Yeah, I know, right? For real. Okay, you two, and we had very different answers there. Thoughts, brothers? A couple of you are recommending patience, a couple of you are not.
Well, I mean, you set it up to make it a sharp edge, the way you asked the question. You could
Help
ask
these
that.
brothers know how to use judgment in a church where they show up and people are baptizing much younger than they're accustomed to. I want you guys
I
to
do
help them.
not want to help people affirm people are going to hell, that they're going to heaven. It's just too serious a thing. And I'm going to be very patient with Sunday school teachers who are citing people they shouldn't be citing, all kinds of stuff. But when it gets to looking at this person and assuring them on behalf of Jesus that they will spend eternity in heaven, I'm going to take my role in that as a person baptizing them very seriously. And I'm just going to give the benefit of the doubt to caution. So no amount of congregational patience that I'm going to do on all kinds of issues with the congregation would get me to budge on that one. Now, if we're talking about we normally baptize 18-year-olds and here's a 15-year-old, that's a whole different matter.
Sure.
But we're talking, you said 6-year-old.
I was
and
trying to
that-
make it young.
Yeah, and that's where I'm just thinking, I'm sure there are many people who are converted before age 6, as people even testified here. We were doing sit-ups, stand up and sit down earlier today. But that we can be sure of it as a church, I think the Southern Baptist Convention is the best evidence I know against that. The braggadocious about having 15 million members, most of whom we only got because in the 20th century we halved our baptismal age. In 1900, you would never baptize the ages they were baptized in the year 2000. I mean, a Presbyterian church would, but a Baptist church would never do it.
So let me ask a question to the congregation. If you went under the water more than once in your life, stand up. My point's made. That's too many. Now, having said that, I would want to move them. Dr. Crystal, W.A. Crystal, who was known for being very evangelistic, he would not baptize anyone at First Baptist under the age of 10. They gave a walk the aisle invitation, but anyone under 10, he referred to it as a step toward God. He always told them, don't hinder the children from expressing their love for Christ, but just understand when that happens, then we're going to deal with them in a form of discipleship. And when they reach their 10th birthday, and I commend him for this because he was pastoring at that time the largest church in the SBC, they will come see the pastor. And I will talk them through to make sure I am convinced of their genuine conversion. And then he would, at that point, allow them to be baptized. But even W.A. Crystal would not baptize anyone, which was, again, virtually unheard of. And I'm surprised he set the example in so many ways, but we didn't follow him in this particular area. And you may think the age should be higher, and I'm not going to argue against that either. But he would not baptize anyone under the age of 10. I would certainly try as rapidly as I could to move them toward that direction. I would.
And I would realize that could take some time to get to. I would just try to temporarily halt young baptisms while we have that conversation. So that's what I would try to do.
Yeah, this is sort of where I was going. Just if you're the new pastor, you're showing up there, you're preaching next week, preach you about 4 or 5 Psalms, just preach through the Psalms, get settled in. Meet with an older pastor that pours into your life and think through, here's how I would frame it, think through the X number of things that you would die for on behalf of that congregation. One of them must certainly be you would give your life for their conversion. Preach a topical series on those things. I want you to know why I'm here, why I'm giving my life to you for the gospel and for you. And this means there's certain things I'm going to be really careful about, namely your soul. And here's an implication about how we do baptisms, or how we do altar calls, and so on and so forth. And I want to walk this through with the leadership of the church so that you know my love for you, and we begin to share a common vision about how to do this well for your soul. I mean, you make reference to Corinthians, we work together with you for your joy, and so on. And so I would just take your time, pause. You're the new person. You're never going to get a better honeymoon than when you first show up. Don't try to attack those things when you first show up, because you will be ending your honeymoon very prematurely. Preach through the Psalms, encourage the people, work out your sort of DNA, talk with some older godly pastors about how to approach that, and then let your congregation know that you're there to give yourself for those things, for their joy in the Lord.
And I think it's good to get those things out even in the candidating process. If you know that your church actually disagrees with you on something that they're going to end up caring a lot about, I think it shows a lack of integrity for you not to indicate that ahead of time. I think, now if you don't know, you don't know. That happens all the time in life, and that's, goodwill on both sides. But I think if you know of something that they're not going to like potentially, I think you honor them and the Lord by just being clear, honest, careful about that. And then if they still want to call you, that's great. I think the BD gives great counsel there. Just start with a series of teaching on that and love them through teaching. That way nobody can kind of blackmail you by knowing, the pastor doesn't believe in this sacred thing that we do with the birthday song every day. Sunday we come and we put money in the offering for missionaries, and it's just great to be able to have a little relief in public preaching and teaching and kindness before you get to a crisis.
I also appreciate how often, brother, you talk about when you get into a church like that, thanking them and praising them for all the evidences of grace you see. If you guys have heard the BD talk before, that's something he'll mention from time to time. And if you hadn't, I wanted to say it because you bring that out so well. What I hope that exercise was useful for is to help all of us see, I wonder if you noticed, the only thing that all of them agreed on, not being patient on, was expositional preaching. That was the only thing I got a unanimous, which is to say, Mark's model of being patient for 8 years on the KJV, whether or not you agree or disagree with that particular one, is just to be commended, and I think serves us all well. So thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. We resume at what time? 7:30. Let me close us in prayer. Father, thank you that you have been patient with us in Christ. Thank you for parents and pastors and children's workers, ministry workers, and teachers who have been patient with us. We confess that we have not been patient with others. Forgive us. Help us to be patient even as you have been patient. Give us a little bit of rest now and refreshment at dinner so that we can come back ready for more from you. In Christ's name, amen.